So I think we can start. We've waited long enough for everyone to come. It's great we managed to get together on such a nice day, which we can totally observe through our windows. It's a real pleasure to welcome you guys here at our event, Danes in Russia, which was organized by Scandinavian Club Gimor Nordlus, with the support of the Danish Cultural Institute and the Danish Embassy in Moscow. I'll be kind of a moderator during our meeting, and I'm sure it'll go well. As you can see, we're recording our meeting, so I hope no one is against it. I would like to present you our speakers for today. And then you will present yourself and then give some topics, and then we will have some time to answer the questions of our listeners. So today we have 5 guys from Denmark, and I want to give the floor to Andrea. I'm glad to see you, and I'd like you to present yourself.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Andea Fugelsang. Hi. I'm 25 years old, and I am from the greater area of Copenhagen, where I am currently staying. Normally, I study political science and history at the University of Copenhagen. And it was a part of that education that managed to get me to Russia this spring as an intern at the Danish Embassy, where I worked at the cultural department and still do, just from home at the moment. I was really happy that I managed to go to Russia because it has always been a country that has fascinated me a lot. I was very interested in the history and culture. And then when we got there, the interns, we tried a lot of different cuisines while we were in Russia that we don't have in Denmark. So I have experimented a lot with the Georgian cuisine in Denmark. So that has been a really nice addition to my cooking. Yes. And later on, I'm going to talk a bit about the Danish university structure. But for now, I will leave the word to Ida.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Ida, and I am 25 years old, and also from Greater Copenhagen, incidentally. And I am one of 2 interns at the Danish Cultural Institute in St. Petersburg. And when I'm not in Russia, I study a master in English studies at the University of Copenhagen. And I have a very large interest in international cultural works and how people are able to connect despite language barriers and different cultural backgrounds using culture. So that was the reason why I wanted to do such an internship. And living in Russia has been a huge experience. St. Petersburg is obviously a great city to work with culture in. It's a huge culture capital. And one thing that has been very interesting for me was that I also got to visit Moscow, and to see the contrast, as you're all well aware, between those 2 cities was just like unlike anything. You won't find 2 large cities in Denmark that are as different as Moscow and St. Petersburg. So that was really interesting for me to experience. Today I'm going to talk about student life in Denmark. Yes, so for now I'm going to pass it on to Lotte.
Thank you, Ida.
Hello everyone, my name is Lotte.
And I study political science in Denmark. Normally I live in the northern parts, but I moved to Aarhus, where I study political science. And in regards to my education, I got the opportunity to apply for an internship, which I did in Moscow at the Danish embassy there. And at the embassy, I work in the agriculture, food and fishery department, which is actually very exciting, especially in regards to the embargo and the sanctions against Russia. So that was very exciting for me. The reason why I wanted to go to Russia is because I think the culture and the history of that country is just magnificent. I have always kind of admired the strength the Russian people have for all the hardship they have been through throughout their world history. And then I have a very great interest in international politics. So I thought it would be very exciting to live in some kind of a special place that Moscow is. And I can only say Moscow surprised me in the best possible way. So I'm very sad that I had to go back to Denmark because of the coronavirus. Later on, I will be talking about the social life at university. But for now, I will give the word to Mads.
Thank you, Lotte.
Hey, my name is Mads. I study at Durham University in England, where I study politics, philosophy, and economics. But I'm from Denmark. There's an island in the middle called Funes. I'm from there. There's 500,000 people, I think. It's the middle of nowhere. I'm going to be talking about international opportunities in Denmark as a foreign student, including the Erasmus program and how you might connect with other people like you if you decide to go to Denmark and study. Of course, I like politics, I like philosophy, I like economics so much that I decided to study it, and I'm now focusing on economics. And I'm also doing an internship at the Danish embassy, which also rolls around economics. I'm at the Trade Council, so I'm assisting Danish companies with doing trade in Russia. It's a bit difficult during the corona, so we've slowed down a bit, but we're starting to make progress again and seeing some improvements. So we kind of function as a consultancy, except we do public diplomacy as well. So we talk to politicians, key stakeholders, and kind of help influence those to help the Danish companies prosper abroad. And I think that's it for me so far. And I'll be sending the word to Harald.
Thank you, Matt.
Hello everybody, my name is Harald. I'm 20 years old, also from Fyn, originally at least, living in Roskilde now, just outside of Copenhagen. I'm the black sheep. I'm not studying at the moment, only doing the internship at the Danish Cultural Institute together with Ida. I think I fell in love with Russia around the age of 15 or 16. Like in my home, we've always listened to a lot of Shostakovich and read a lot of Russian literature. And I've been studying the language for just under 2 years now, hoping to be fluent someday. And I'm very, very sad that I won't be able to practice on a daily basis anymore. But then I'll just have to come back at a later stage. And I think that's actually it. So I'm passing the word to Andrea now.
Yes, and I'm back. I'm going to talk about the university structure in Denmark. As some of you may know, there are 3 types of higher educations you can undertake in Denmark, but I will focus on universities since this is what I know most of. But if you have any more questions regarding the other ones, I will be more than happy to give you an answer after the talk. Yes, so in Denmark we have 8 universities, and these universities are scattered around the country. Some of them focus on specific areas. So we have a business university, and then we have universities that are more focused on humanities or have a broader scope where the educations are more varied, like Copenhagen University. Yes. And the way they structure the university education, it varies a lot. And I think Ida will talk more about that as well. So once you found the university you want to get into in Denmark, there are 2 ways you can get in. You can either get in by your average point grade from high school. So the universities where a lot of students apply for, then you would need a higher average grade than the ones where not that many people apply for. But if you don't have the right grades for an education, then you have the possibility to apply by a motivational application, and I think about 10% get in this way. It is quite normal in Denmark to take a gap year or a few gap years before you start your university degree. So this will take the starting age to be about 2021, I think. Yeah. And once you started the education, then normally it takes about 5 years. And the structure is you take a bachelor's degree at first, and this takes about 3 years. And you would not necessarily get a job after this unless you study engineering or something with the internet, I think. So most people, they continue on to take a master's degree. And this is nominated for about 5 years. But students like me, I have taken longer time because I have worked on the side and stuff like that. So it depends, but normally around 5 years. I think Ida will talk a bit more about what we do during these 5 years. So Ida, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Well, just as there are a million ways of planning the course of your studies, there are also a million different experiences of studying, obviously. And one thing that they have in common is that when you study at a university, you are doing a full-time occupation. For some people, this means that you attend university classes for 8 hours a day, every day, like during the week. And then for other students, like me, who's studying humanities, you only have about 8 hours for the entire week. So there's really not a lot of teaching done, but then you're expected to do self-studying for the remainder of that week. And I think I really enjoy that because you get to plan your own time, and you can have a job on the side, and you can have you can study all night and then sleep all day if you want to. So for some students, it's very flexible to attend university in Denmark, and that's really nice. And it also depends on where you study, what your form of teaching is. The most common forms, like in Russia, I assume, are lectures and class instruction, and then there are some different types of class instruction and group work. Some universities, for instance, Roskilde University has a very strong profile in working in group projects, which means that basically most of the papers that you have to write and the courses that you do and the exams that you take are actually taken in groups, which is very appealing to some people because it's based on this concept of group learning, where you learn better when you're able to share your perspectives with others constantly. And it also, in some sense, prepares you really well for working professionally in a lot of different industries, because like this way of attending university where you're just sitting on your own and writing papers and stuff won't really prepare you for doing a job where you have to work in different projects with different people. So it's actually seen as a very good way for preparing for the job market afterwards. Yeah, for many students, there are a lot of a lot of hours spent sitting in the library, as I'm sure is the same in Russia. When you're not working hard in the library, many students have a job on the side. That's actually 3 out of 4 university students in Denmark who work. And it's very popular to have a job because you get a lot of really valuable experience preparing for your future career. And then you also, of course, make some extra money. Because in terms of money, when you study in Denmark, you get a government grant to cover your living expenses, and this grant is paid out every single month. And it basically means that when you attend university, you should be able to cover your rent and to pay for food and pay for transport, so that you don't have to stress over your finances, which is really wonderful and very privileged. But it's based on this perception of education as an investment in the future. Like if you study and you really spend your time studying and become a well-educated person, you become a citizen who's able to contribute positively to the Danish society, and then you get a job and you pay your taxes, and in time you're actually able to pay back the money that you've received during your time of studying. So in that way, it's like, it's not money you get for free, but it's money you pay back at some time. Yes, and then let me see what else I have. Well, obviously it's very expensive to live in Denmark and to live in Copenhagen, and for that reason, it also makes a lot of sense to have a job right next to studying. It's not recommended to work more than 15 hours a week, but some people work a lot more than that, because if you get a really interesting job, you might do that, but it will have a negative effect on studying. In terms of demographics, more than half of all university students in Denmark live in Copenhagen, and the other half live in the outskirts of Copenhagen, where there are also universities, and in the remaining university cities like Aarhus, Aalborg, and Roskilde. In terms of where people live, most people rent a room or rent a flat. About 10% live in student accommodation, like you have in Russia, these dorms where you have your own room, or you share a room and then you share a kitchen. Yeah, so I think that's something that's quite similar, the way people live. Something that's a lot different from Russia is the way people get around, as you may know, because the Danish university cities are tiny compared to St. Petersburg and Moscow. So most people get on their bike when they have to go to classes or they have to go to their job. And Danish students cycle an average of 2.7 kilometers every day, which, if you think about all the students that never get on their bike, it means that some people really put some kilometers into the pedals, and I think that's really cool. And it's because it's very affordable, and it's climate friendly, and it makes sense to bike around when you have to go to stuff. So yeah, I think that's why we have a strong bike culture, especially among students. Yes, and I think that was what I had to say about the boring parts of studying, and now Lotte will take over and talk about the fun stuff, social life, when you're a student. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I will try and paint a very pretty picture of the social life. No, actually in Denmark, I think most universities have a very great starting period. When every new semester starts with kind of when you're starting out the first year with something called like a rusuge. It's like a whole week where you learn your new classmates and the one you're going to spend the next 3 years with. And there will be some kind of parties, a lot of them, especially in the first year. I think that's the period where you learn a lot of new people through parties. For myself, at Political Science in Aarhus, they have a very great span of unions and societies and clubs that you can join. So when you're not studying in the library or at home or sitting with your study group, you actually have the opportunity to meet up with people who you have the common sense with or have some common interest with. That could be going to football or soccer or a debate club, or you find like international politics are interesting. There's also a club for that. So that's a way to kind of have like the sense of community, especially when in Denmark it's very traditional that you move to another city to study, and therefore you not necessarily have a lot of friends. So in these ways, to join clubs or unions or societies, you get new friends in the new city that you live in. So you're not all alone. At Aarhus, we have a very big and special event once a year that's called Kapsejlads, which means that it's about 12 different faculties for the university who participates in a competition where the primarily thing is that they have to be in a boat and then sail on the other side of the lake, and the lake isn't that big, but it's a very huge event with about 100,000 people coming and joining for the day. It becomes kind of a festival for one day because we have a lot of entertainment and some musicians comes. So that's a very fun day. And I will say that normally there is a very great kind of sense of friendship when you're starting out at universities, because all people are new. And I think a lot of these faculties in the different universities are very good at using that period to kind of strengthen people's friendships with new people. Should I ask any of these questions that come up in the chat, or is it afterwards? Sorry.
Yeah, later.
Perfect. So I will say that the social life in Denmark is very good, especially when you are at universities. And like Ida mentioned earlier, it's not all education that have like 37 hours a week where you have to be at the university. So you can also have like lunches with your friends, or go out to the movies at the night or something like that. So I think in Denmark we are very good at both partying, but also having a good time without alcohol, even though you shouldn't think that. I think that was about it for the social life. And now I'll give the word to Mads.
Thank you, Lotte. Thank you very much.
Actually, I'm going to answer the question that was just put forward, because it's what I'm covering. You can do a 6 months internship, or like a semester-long internship. I think a lot of big companies are actually having it now. I know Maersk has, Rambøll has it. You can also go on exchange, which is also usually for 1 semester. I know some people from Copenhagen Business School, they went first they went to, Durham University? Durham University, either for the masters or the bachelors, and then I went to Canada for the other semester. So you can actually pretty much do one for both degrees. So you can spend a year away somewhere, which of course is paid for because you don't pay any tuition fees. Otherwise, people talked about study jobs. I think that's one of the differences between Denmark and other universities, like other countries with other universities, is that you often have a student job on the side. Right now I'm studying in England, and they don't have that. I don't know anyone who's actually studying anything or doing anything relevant to their studies on the side. So it seems to be very much a Danish thing, that people might actually have a year of part-time experience when they get a job. And of course, because people get government grants, they often do internships for free. I mean, they don't get any salary because they're already paid from the government. So there's really no downside for international Danish companies to give you some kind of employment for 6 months as an intern. Right now at the Danish embassy, we don't get any salary. Our flat is paid for, but we don't actually get any money. But then again, we do from the Danish government, so that makes it possible to do a lot of things, especially if you're abroad. I know at Durham right now, I'm paying rent that is covered by the SU, the government support. And I did cover that one. And then we have international societies and student housing. I know at Aalborg University, they have an entire college for international students. And of course, the Erasmus program is fairly big. I don't believe you have to be an EU student. As long as you're studying in a EU country, you can be part of the Erasmus program and go to other places, other European countries, and study there. So generally, there seems to be a pretty big community of international students around different universities. I know that Aarhus University, where some of the other interns are studying, there's 20 universities in Australia, 30 universities in Germany, 5 in Singapore, 1 in Brazil, 10 in Canada that you can study at. So there are plenty of partner universities, and a considerable portion, I think 17%, 18% last year of the students at Aarhus University were actually international students. And every time we get someone from a different university, of course, we can send someone back. And people often make use of that and go to very lovely countries, including Russia. I think that was actually it. I'll save the rest for the questions. So I'll give you Harald, who will talk about Danish and Russian connections at the university.
Yeah, thank you very much. I completely forgot to talk about, or to mention what I was talking about. So there's a very wide variety of Danish-Russian exchange programs, but given the nature of Russian bureaucracy, they can be a little bit harder to obtain. In St. Petersburg, St. Petersburg is a so-called sister city with Aarhus. which means that Aarhus University has a good history of cooperation with the different universities there. I know the people studying Ruslandsstudier, Russia studies, are typically given a period of exchange at the Herzen State University, and I can see some of you in the calls have probably met several of them. The Danish state is very keen on as many Danes as possible learning Russian. So while they don't give grants as such to study for a semester in Russia outside of the monthly grant that has been previously been covered, they give out a lot of summer school grants for students of Russian, and I believe it's the language that they're given the most grants for, or the language study that's given the most grants. Every year there's 31 people starting to study Russia studies, which is the most Russia specific education in Denmark, but there's a lot of educations where you can actually take Russian as a minor subject, and a lot of and there's also education in Copenhagen, which is called Russian and Studies of Eastern European, where there's also a big history of exchange with Russia. In terms of Russians studying in Denmark, I've actually only met one, but the general idea I've gotten from the students of Danish I met while in Russia is that it's generally speaking quite difficult to be accepted, also in part due to bureaucracy. But there are definitely some. There's a lot of Danish educations that are also quite Russia oriented, especially in the humanitarian faculties. There's a lot of focus and a lot of side subjects you can do on Russian literature, Russian art, Russian music and such. And the same goes for a lot of the more business-oriented educations, where there's a lot about trading with Russia, navigating Russian law and the like. And I actually think that is about it. So if you have any questions, we'd be very happy to hear them.
Thank you very much, Harold. So now I'm looking the chat. What do we have here? Master program, yeah. So I have really one question. This is to everyone. Yeah, I wanted to ask, how do you like life in Russia? And have you noticed some similarities or differences between Russian people and Danes? So if you notice some, could you give them, explain some? Yeah, I'd like to hear that. So as a question to everyone, so I if someone wants to answer it, then welcome.
I think generally speaking, the average Russian is a lot more well read than the average Dane, but that's of course maybe a St. Petersburg specific thing. They're also a lot more direct. In Denmark, we really are quite shy. There's not a lot of eye contact. I think that's one of the biggest cultural shocks I got. That was how intense it suddenly was. Feeling like everybody was staring at you. I also think, generally speaking, Russians have a tendency to be a little bit more structured and hardworking than the average Dane. Which is also great. I don't know if anyone else has some different observations they wanna share.
I could say that it seems
Thank
like
you.
it's very different across Russia how people are. Like you're talking about St. Petersburg, which is beautiful in architecture and well read. Then you have regions of Moscow that are somewhat different. I mean, in general, the similarities between Denmark and Russia, there are some, but the countries, of course, Russia is not just Russia. I mean, you can be in Vladivostok and you can be in Moscow, and I think you have 9-10 time zones or something. I mean, it's a massive country, so it's very difficult to compare.
Yeah. Now I wanted also to ask this one maybe to Ida, but also for everyone, what differences did you notice between Moscow and St. Petersburg as a Dane? And maybe you have something to say about it.
Yes. Well, I think the whole idea of St. Petersburg being the window to the West is very evident in how that city is experienced, because it when you've seen a lot of European capitals and you visit St. Petersburg, you don't really notice the difference that much. There are a lot of differences, but in terms of architecture and in terms of city planning and the huge museums and all that, it looks very much like Vienna or some parts of Copenhagen or something like that. So I was quite surprised by how European it felt living in St. Petersburg. And then when I came to Moscow, which was like in March at some point, and I arrived during the morning traffic, came straight down into the metro, and like it was just so chaotic and so like everything was bigger and more majestic, and you could really feel that it's a city that has a couple of more million people than St. Petersburg. So yeah, I think just in terms of size and scale, and everything is bigger and noisier, and like there aren't the same like architectural limitations imposed on the city. I think that was very interesting, and it really creates a whole different experience of being in that city. Yeah. So, and then people also say that people are friendlier in St. Petersburg. I don't know if it's correct or incorrect, that Muscovites, they're busy. They have to get like fast to the next destination. I don't know if I noticed that, but it could be.
Thank you, Ida.
You're welcome.
I have two small questions, but first of all, I'd like to thank you all for your presentations. It was really instructive for me. And as a person who was born in St. Petersburg and spent most of my life there, I fully agree with Ida because Moscow is a chaotic city, and I don't believe that it is better than St. Petersburg. Okay. So I'd like to ask if it is easy to get a job while studying in Denmark, because in Russia we face this problem all the time, because the employer demands experience that we are currently getting while studying. So it is like a vicious cycle. And I'd like to ask if it's possible to get a job in a sphere you're currently studying for, and how easy it is.
I can take this one. It depends on the area you're studying in. I was lucky enough to study political science at first and live in the greater area of Copenhagen. And therefore it was quite easy because there is a lot of ministries and it was the field I'm working in. But on the other hand, if you live in some of the other cities in Denmark, it can be difficult to get a student relevant job because there aren't that many workplaces there. A lot of people do volunteering instead as a way to get the experience. But it depends on the field of study. So political science and the ones that are where the job is pretty much straightforward afterward is okay to get a job in. But if you have one of the more creative or less specific educations, it can be difficult if you don't live in the center. Yeah.
And just to make a comment to that, it's also, even though we say that a lot of students in Denmark have works, it's also notable to say that jobs can also be like when you're sitting at the cashier in the supermarket. That's also a very common job for university students in Denmark. So it's not all glamorous that people get the student relevant jobs, but it is common that when you're studying at the university, you have some kind of job on the side. Just So because I study in Aarhus, and there isn't that many opportunities for political science in the same way that there is in Copenhagen. So that becomes more like you work in the kommune, in the city hall or something like that, if you're lucky for that. Yeah.
And if I can add one point to that, is that the internships that we've also mentioned is a very common way of people like kind of getting that job that is relevant to their studies. Like people often begin studying and then they have a job working in a shop, working in a cafe or something like that. And then the further you progress in your studies, and maybe you get an internship, maybe you get some contacts or you attend job fairs or something like that, and then people often find student relevant jobs later in their education. So I think that's a very common way of doing that.
Yeah, and just a last comment, it's also very we use networking a lot in Denmark, so you have to know people to get into the good places often, at least if you want the very great jobs, then you have to know someone. And I think that's kind of the same in Russia. I'm not sure, but that was the feeling I got, that you are better positioned if you know someone. So that's also a factor.
I can also add a comment from a Danish student who's studying in the sciences as physics. If you're really good students, what some people do is that they actually get like the teaching assistant jobs for the lower students and then earn money this way to kind of build on that profession. Because in sciences, it's often really difficult, at least at bachelor level, to get kind of something within the field, especially in physics, because you need to be at the top to kind of study this field. But then usually some people, if they want to, they can at master level start to direct this, like the master degrees towards a future job, and then kind of transition straight from that in kind of a smooth transition where in the end of the study they kind of work half time at the job and then half time study and then just go to the job afterwards. But yeah, it's a bit different if you study science or not science.
Thank you. Ekaterina, do you have?
Well, I guess
I thought you had some.
Well, I don't think I have any other questions. Well, I also wanted to ask if it is hard to go to Russia if you are an EU citizen, because if we say vice versa, it is hard because most of us, well, Russia is a non-European country, so we have to like get. There is a hard system of invitations and some payments. For example, when I studied for a scholarship, well, in Denmark for 3 weeks, I got a visa only for these particular weeks, and no more. So it is quite a short period of time. And I'm currently planning to do my master degree in Denmark. So I wanted to ask if it is easy or hard to get a permission to study in Denmark for a non-European citizen, and from your personal experience, was it hard for you to do your internship in Russia? Did you need any kind of invitation or some bureaucratic difficulties? So yes, my English fails me today, so I hope you understood.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I think when we had to apply or get into Russia, we also had to apply for a visa. And we had an invitation from the embassy. So that was kind of our invitation. And I think it goes both ways, so that if you are going to study in Denmark, then I think it will be perhaps an easier process if you have an education place that you're going to be and you know the time limit. But I'm not sure of the specifics, but I think it will be not necessarily easier, but I think it would be possible to make that happen for you. But we also had to go through, and we didn't have to pay though. But if you're a normal tourist going into Russia from Denmark, then you will have to pay for your visa. I think that was it.
Thank you.
And okay, and if we talk about universities, so is it hard to enter university in Denmark for non-European citizens? So is Denmark actually popular with international students?
I think I can give some of the educations, it depends on what you're going to take your masters in, but some of them will have space for international students. So it would, if you know the specific field of interest you want to take it, then you should contact, I think, the specific university and seek out what kind of international study directions they have for a master's program. I'm not sure about the full package then, but I think it depends on the specific university, because I know Copenhagen University, where I study, they have a lot of international students, but most of them are there for 6 months or a semester. So I'm not quite sure about the whole masters, but I think it is possible.
Yeah, I think that depends on it depends on how you're going to apply, because if it's kind of like an exchange system, then it would have to be a place from a Danish university with your university. But you can also apply beside that system, and then you will apply like any Danish person, and that would be based on either what grades you have gotten, or if you have the qualifications based on the courses you have taken. So I will, as Andrea said, if you know which kind of master you want to study, then I will both contact your university, but also the Danish university that you have interested in, because they will help you with all the formulas. Yeah. Did you have something, Andrea?
Yeah, I will just send you a link to the Danish Ministry for Education, Higher Education. They have in English a description on the admission and stuff like that. Maybe it can be helpful, but I will post it in the chat, so you can just keep on talking.
Did that answer your question? Or
yes, you did. Thank you ever so much.
Yeah, I wanted to ask also. Yeah, I wanted also to ask if you could tell us some more information about your stage in the embassy and in the Danish Institute in St. Petersburg. If you have some words to say about your lifestyle and more about your work and stage, then you'll be very welcome.
should we go first, the embassy, or do you want to, Ida and Harold? Okay, great. I can start out, and then Mads and Andrea can jump in whenever. We were five interns that started in each department. And for me, it was very kind of scary to come to another country. I didn't know anything about it in that term. I didn't know the language or understood it. That was very challenging, I will say, because you haven't that many English signs in Moscow. So it took me a while to learn what milk was. But I would say at the embassy, we had so amazing colleagues that were very great at helping us. And I think I learned a lot for the month and a half I was there. We can't talk that much about our job and what our assignment was, but I will say that in my field with the agriculture, it was very interesting to see how the country has developed since 2014. I was very amazed about that. So that I was very impressed of. I don't know if Andrea or Mads, you want to say something from your departments?
I think our department they're fairly similar. I mean, we're both in the trade department, you're working for agriculture, so I might want to add that, of course, our focus is mostly on Danish companies wanting to enter the market. We also have some big Danish companies that are already in Russia, but I think last 2 years, so our primary focus has actually been to get Danish companies to enter the Russian market.
Yeah. Andrea?
I'm jumping in. Yes, it was very nice to be in the cultural department. It was nice to see and experience the great exchange there is with culture between Denmark and Russia. for instance, there's been a lot of movie showings for Danish movies in Russia. When we first arrived the first week, there was a great movie showing called Before the Frost. So it's been really interesting to see how well received and how great the bonds between Russia and Denmark are on the cultural front. So I was surprised about how much collaboration there is, pleasantly surprised. So that was really interesting. And then it was fun as an intern to just get to work at a place where my colleagues, because it was a cultural department, they knew what was going on in the city. So we just had an insider guide to, okay, this weekend you have to see this museum.
Yeah.
So that was a really nice experience.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, and everybody has just been super nice. To answer the question earlier with the difference between Russian and Danish people, I worked with some Russian people, and it was just amazing because you hang out more than you do with your Danish colleagues. I was quite surprised by that. The workplace I've been in before, it's okay, it's 5, we go home. Here was more, oh, what are you doing this weekend? And can we, grab a beer afterwards? So that was really nice. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea.
I suppose it's my and Harald's turn. Sorry. Well, I think the Cultural Institute is obviously a very different institution than the embassy. First of all, we focus only on culture, but and then we serve kind of different purposes, both some creating networks and connections between Danish culture, both artists and writers and different actors in the Danish cultural scene, and helping them get to Russia, and then also creating networks for people interested in Denmark who are based in Russia. That aspect has been one of the most interesting for me, to meet the students of Danish in Russia and do events with them, do different talks, do language exchange. I saw like a message from someone who attended one of our talks in the chat, and it's been so nice to meet all these different people who for some reason have an interest in Denmark, and kind of like hearing their perspective on my home country and culture. And I think you learn something new about yourself from hearing another person's perspective on it, and that has been very interesting. I don't know, Harald, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that was incredibly spot on. Like, but yeah, you're definitely right. It has really been great meeting so many Russians and experiencing how interested they are in things. You know, in Denmark, people aren't really interested in the same way that you guys are. You know, if we do a presentation in Denmark, it's very seldom you get questions, and they don't have the same curiosity, which I think really has been great. So yeah, it's about it.
Thank you. So the last question from my friend who wrote to me in Russian. The question is about your social life, your hangouts as our peers. I think you can say a lot about it. So, if you please.
Well, I can begin. I've been hanging out with Harald a lot. Obviously, it's difficult to arrive to a new city. It always is, but I've actually been surprised by how open people are, and often when we go out and do a talk about something, people come up and say, "Hi, my name is da da da. It's very interesting to meet you. Do you want to grab a coffee sometime?" And it's fairly easy to talk to people and meet people, and as previously mentioned, Russians tend to be a bit more open than Danes, actually, which maybe doesn't say a lot because Danes are very closed. So I've been positively surprised by how easy it was to meet people and socialize with others, and Harald as well.
I have one small question. Well, So you guys come from different regions of Denmark, and as far as I know, there are different dialects and accents in Danish language. So do you feel the difference when you speak Danish with each other? And how is it possible to differ these languages, well, different variants of Danish, one from another? Because when I was in Denmark, I met a girl from Russia, and she always said that these people in Copenhagen have such a nice Copenhagen accent, and it was really hard for me to figure out what is the difference. I'm so sorry. I hope
No,
I didn't
it's okay.
insult you.
I will say, because I'm not from Copenhagen, I live in Jutland, and we think that the Copenhagen accent isn't that good. It's actually, it's like, oh, the very worst kind of one to hear. But if you ask them about my accent, and I'm from the northern part, it's also very horrible. But it's more an issue, if you can say that, in the older generations, because normally we young people, we don't differ that much in how we speak as they did for 15, 20, 30 years ago.
But we had great fun with it as interns at the embassy, because
Yeah.
I was the only one from the Copenhagen area, and Mads was obviously from Fyn, but the three other was from Jutland.
Yeah.
So it was a great way to tease each other with the accent. I would say, oh, that's the Copenhagen thing to say. And I would say, yeah, but what about this word?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, because it's common that you then have different names or kind of words you use to describe a situation that's different from if you live in Copenhagen or if you live in Aalborg, where I'm from. So we exchange words, but it's not like it's hard to understand when you speak Danish. And if you're talking to someone who's learning Danish, then you become more aware as a Dane not to speak with your dialect words. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you all. That was incredible. So for now we're passing to questions from the chat. So someone named JK wants to know, do you guys want to visit other Russian cities apart from Moscow and St. Petersburg?
Yes, obviously. I think there's a very long list of cities that I would like to see. I think at some point, and I'm sure this is a dream that I'm sharing with all the interns in this chat now, is taking the Trans-Siberian Railroad and getting to see the country in that way. But I was meant to go to Murmansk 2 weeks or something after we got sent home, so that's definitely also on the top of my list. I'd really been looking forward to seeing that, especially also the Northern Lights. We don't get anything like that in Denmark, so I really think that would be a big experience.
Yeah, thank you, Harald. Now there's another question from Zina. Were there any difficulties with speaking in Danish with Russian students who study Danish?
I actually think most of the students of Danish that we met were incredibly eloquent in Danish, and had an amazing comprehension and pronunciation, and I was incredibly surprised. I didn't think in a million years, given how difficult it is for me to learn Russian, that they would be able to master the Danish language so skillfully. So no, not really.
Great. So sounds really great. Pleasant to hear. Now there is another question which I accidentally skipped from JK. Are there any extra or special study programs and internships for foreign, also Russian students that are studying Danish language? And is knowledge of Danish a serious advantage?
I can take that one. Firstly, you don't have to speak Danish if you're in Denmark. I mean, everyone under 70 years old, I mean, they speak fluent English, and we have it in schools. So especially new generations, we're perfectly fluent, somewhat fluent in English. And I can see that Denmark has a scholarship, cultural agreements, which actually where you can get 5 to 12 months for PhD students, 5 or 10 months for masters, and 5 or 10 months for bachelor students who is studying the Danish language and literature. So there are some, I can just send you a link in the chat. There are some options for Russians that want to go to Denmark.
And just a short addition to that is if you go to Denmark to study anything really, you'll often be able to take some Danish courses on the side. Sometimes they're offered for free, sometimes you have to pay something. But even if you study engineering or whatever, you will be able to take some kind of Danish culture or language course. Maybe not as ambitious as doing a full degree in Danish, but definitely a good way to pick up a bit while you're at it.
And in regards to that, about if there's any special internships for Russians, I don't think that's necessarily anything special, but a lot of Danish companies actually have a very international profile. So it would be able to have an internship where you speak English, if that's any help.
Thank you very much. Also, I can't ignore anymore message of Henrietta's message. These warm words, I felt that, even I. Thank you for coming, Henrietta. I'm glad to see you one more time. So I think if we don't have any questions, then I'd like to thank all of you guys. It was an incredible meeting. I had so much pleasure from you. And of course, I'd like to thank Andrei and Ekaterina and Henrietta also, because without them, this meeting would not be possible. So I think this is it for today from me. And if you have some words, any one of you, then I'll be hearing.
Yes, Sigurd, we, on behalf of co-organizers, we are very grateful to the Scandinavian Club. Thank you very much for inviting us. We were glad to be part of this two events, and many thanks to our speakers. I think the discussion was very interesting, and we are open for any further dialogue, and please get in touch with us whenever you will find it relevant. Thank you so much. Best regards from sunny St. Petersburg. And we miss our trainees, of course. We miss you very much.
We miss you a lot too, as Andrei.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is just the beginning of a new partnership and a new friendship. Maybe someday we will meet in real life, not online, and then we could communicate even closer. So thanks to everyone. It was really a pleasure to speak to you, to listen to you. Yeah, and thanks to you. Thank to you from chat also. That's all for today. Thank you one more time, and goodbye. Bye bye.
Thank
Bye.
you too.
Thank you.
Bye. Farvel og tak.
Bye.